A woman's tragic murder in 1964 became a case study in human psychology and urban life that is still discussed today. This is the Kitty Genovese story.
Wow, you're doing it.
I am. You know, I read a book about this case like 4 years ago and I was going to do it. And I don't know why I didn't. Do you remember?
I feel like sometimes when you read a memoir too or get excited about a case and start researching, you find other ones and then go, oh, like maybe I'll do this and I'll come back to it.
Yes.
You put them on. You actually tend to start a lot of cases. So like you probably have a number of cases going and then you come back to them. Like I start one and I only focus. I can't like do that.
Yeah, actually, you're correct. That's exactly what happened. You want to hear something very ironic?
Yeah.
As I was finishing this episode, we got an email from a listener, Sarah, asking us to cover this case.
Get out.
Yeah. And it was funny because I was literally writing the episode and, you know, like I get bored. So I'll like look at my emails. And then I was like, oh, my God. So Sarah's a psychology student and she says that she wasn't taught the full story. And honestly, I was not taught the full story either. Because what I thought I knew about this case was grossly inaccurate.
Get out. What you know is probably what I know. All right.
Maybe. And I would bet many of our listeners had a similar experience. So I'm totally excited to set the record straight.
Wow.
Because I've even taught about this case in my class and I used some of the misinformation I realized.
Wow. Okay. I can't.
Okay.
I'm like, all right, I'm in.
Yeah. So basically, we're covering a story today that was so chilling, and it was a murder in New York City that shocked the nation. But it wasn't just the crime itself that made headlines, if you recall. It was what happened, or rather what didn't happen, surrounding it.
Yes.
So we're going to explore the headlines, the psychology, and really look into what has made this case so historic. And it was the catalyst for something pretty big as well.
Yes. Oh, I'm so excited.
Okay, great. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it, and let's meet Kitty. Kitty was born Catherine Susan Genovese on July 7th, 1935 in Park Slope, Brooklyn, New York. Yay, Park Slope. Yay, Brooklyn. My favorite place.
Yeah.
She went by the name Kitty and was the oldest of 5 children. Her siblings all adored her, and she was also very well-loved and popular amongst her peers. She was described as self-assured beyond her years. She had a sunny disposition. Just like me, right, Meghan?
Stop it.
In 1954, her mother witnessed a murder in New York City, and that prompted the family to move to New Canaan, Connecticut. But Kitty loved the city life, so she stayed behind in Brooklyn to be with her grandparents.
Oh.
But she had recently graduated from high school, so she was, on that at that point where she's, almost in adulthood. So, her parents allowed her to make that decision.
Was she living with her grandparents?
She was living with her grandparents before she did end up getting her own place shortly after.
Okay.
She was also engaged to be married that same year.
Right. Okay.
But the marriage was short-lived. They only made it a couple of months. And after the divorce, Kitty moved into her own apartment. So she lived with her grandparents, got married, possibly lived with her new husband for a very brief time before getting divorced.
Okay.
She was really enjoying life on her own. She worked several clerical jobs, but she became kind of bored with the profession. And by the late 1950s, she switched careers and she became a bartender.
Oh, fun.
Yes. Yeah. And she moved to Kew Gardens in Queens.
Get out.
Yeah. I'm so jealous. She lived in the best areas.
I know. This sounds like such a fun trajectory.
I know. Well, until.
Right. I mean her.
Yes, I know. Just her young years.
Yeah.
By 1960, she was the manager of a bar called Eve's 11th Hour in Queens.
Okay.
And around this time, she also met the love of her life, a young woman named Mary Ann Solanco, who she began living with.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately, at the time, though, they had to tell people that they were just roommates and friends, as same-sex relationships were still incredibly stigmatized.
That's correct, yeah.
Only those closest to them knew the truth about their relationship.
Okay.
At the time of the events we are discussing, the couple was ready to celebrate their 1-year anniversary, and things were going great. Kitty was working double shifts at bars in hopes to open her own Italian restaurant. So she had big dreams. But sadly, Kitty's life would be cut short before her dream of opening up her own establishment ever came to pass. On the night of March 13th, 1964, Kitty was finishing up tending bar at Eve's. She closed up as she normally did and got in her car around 2:30 a.m. to make the drive back to her apartment in Kew Gardens. At 3:15 a.m., she parked her car in the Kew Gardens Long Island Railroad Station parking lot. This was about 100 feet from the door to her apartment. And this is, a lot of people would park there because, parking in New York even then was not easy.
Of course.
So people would park in the railroad commuter lot.
Mm-hmm.
So just to give you an idea of her apartment, it was stores on the bottom and then apartments on the top.
Okay.
So in order to get into the apartment building, you had to go through an alleyway at the rear of the building. And unbeknownst to Kitty, a man had followed her as she left the parking lot.
Okay, but not from the bar, from the parking lot.
Well, as we'll come to find out, he, in fact, did see her leaving work and followed her to her home.
Okay, all right.
Later identified as Winston Mosley, this man was armed with a hunting knife, and he stalked Kitty as she headed for the apartment's back door. Once Kitty realized that she was being followed, she began to run, but so did her stalker. This is one of my biggest fears. What do you do when you get the feeling that someone's following you?
Mm-hmm.
Is it better to just keep walking? If you run, they run, scream, play dead? Like, this is my biggest fear.
I think it's like situational. I've definitely been in a situation where I thought someone was following me and had gone on high alert, switched sides of the street.
Mm-hmm.
I've definitely done things, but it's always situational. Like, it changes.
And there's no right thing to do.
No, of course
here.
not. No.
Unfortunately, although she did pick up speed and started to run, he did as well. And he quickly overtook her, stabbing her twice in the back as she screamed, "Oh my God, he stabbed me. Help me." And although it was after 3 a.m., several neighbors heard her cry, but only a few of them recognized the cry as a sound for help. Now, some people just thought it was drunk people outside. Some people thought it was maybe a domestic dispute, kids messing around. At this time, everyone, there was kind of this idea of private matters, leave people alone, let them figure out their own stuff. There was one neighbor in particular, a man named Robert Moser, who shouted at the attacker, "Let that girl alone." And as a result, Mosley actually ran away.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
And witnesses would later say that they saw him enter his car and drive away. But Kitty was seriously injured, and no one came out to help her as she dragged herself towards the rear of the building. And even worse, her attacker returned 10 minutes later to look for Kitty a second time.
No. Did you know that?
I didn't actually, no. Not until... And unfortunately, he found her lying in the hallway at the back of the building, where a locked door had prevented her from going inside.
Oh, my gosh.
At this point, it was out of view of the street and also out of view of many of those who had heard or seen the initial attack. And Mosley stabbed Kitty several more times, raped her as she bled out, and stole $49 from her purse before retreating to his car. One witness said his father called the police after the first attack and reported that a woman was, quote, beat up, but got up and was staggering around. A few minutes after the second attack, another witness allegedly called friends for advice on what to do before calling the police. It's important to note the times of these calls are unclear, but what we do know is that the calls were sent to the police and they were not given high priority. Because guess what? 911 did not exist in New York City at the time.
Ah, right. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So the only thing citizens could do was to call their local police precinct or hope that there was an officer walking around nearby.
Okay.
With no help coming at this point, one of Kitty's friends, Sophia, found her shortly after the second attack.
I'm sorry, what do you mean she found her? Like,
she was in the hallway at this point, Kitty. And at some point, I guess her friend heard commotion and she looked to see what was going on and then found her friend.
I thought you said she was outside. A locked door prevented her from getting in.
At some point, she got into the hallway. It's unclear how. Or it's possible Sophia saw her and brought her inside.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, but I believe also when he came back for the second attack, somehow they got inside because reports say something about him doing it in a hallway, but it's very unclear.
It could have been even that he took her keys and dragged them inside. But
yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Kitty was covered in blood, and slashes through her hands suggested that she had attempted to defend herself during the half-hour-long attack. Sophia held Kitty in her arms until an ambulance finally arrived around 4:15 a.m. But unfortunately, there was nothing they could do, and Kitty died on the way to the hospital.
This is such a sad story.
The next day, the New York Times ran a story, and this sparked a huge debate on bystander apathy and community in urban areas.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the most famous and sensational headline came from the New York Times on March 27th, 1964, reading, quote, 37 who saw the murder didn't call the police. And this headline would become iconic, and it would help crystallize the narrative of the public apathy and urban indifference.
Right.
Even though it was found to be exaggerated and misleading in many important ways, which we'll discuss later.
All right.
Other sensational headlines and phrases from that time included, quote, apathy at stabbing of Queens woman shocks inspector. Also from the New York Times, emphasizing police dismay over a bystander inaction. Quote, Queens woman stabbed to death in front of 38 witnesses. If you notice, now it's 38, not 37.
Okay.
Variations of this would be among smaller regional papers as well.
Mm-hmm.
Another one, quote, no one helped. And that was also used as a summary or a subtitle in many media outlets at the time.
Okay.
Lastly, the death of Kitty Genovese, public indifference. That was a common editorial framing and follow-up articles and opinion pieces on the story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably what you know most of the story. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
When I think of Kitty Genovese, I think of bystander apathy or the bystander effect.
Bystander effect is what I think of, yeah.
Before we talk about the bystander effect and really get into the details of it, I want to talk about what happened with the investigation and the perpetrator.
Okay.
Despite several witnesses who had seen the man who actually committed the crime, the NYPD started their investigation about Kitty's murder much closer to home. Do you want to guess where they started?
With her girlfriend?
Exactly. Just a few hours after the murder,
She was
Kitty's
sexually assaulted. I mean, not saying that a woman can't sexually assault, but I would think it... okay. All right. You know what? Just go ahead.
I do want to add about the sexual assault. There were some reports that said there was not even evidence of sexual assault. Some reports say that there was evidence, but it was kind of mixed. So I just want to put that out there.
Okay.
But either way, Kitty's girlfriend, Marianne, was interrogated for 6 hours by 2 homicide detectives. And of course, there was a very strong focus on their relationship.
Did she reveal the true nature of their relationship?
No, not at first. Eventually, I think it came out, though.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was afraid, because at this time, it was criminalized also, being in same-sex relationships. Like, you would have vice squads go into same-sex bars and, you know, like, wait for people, almost like, you know, like skirting the line of entrapment. They would find ways for people to break small laws just so they could bring them in. But it was really, they were criminalizing their sexuality.
This poor woman must have been so scared. She just lost the love of her life, and she's in a lot. I mean, just the fear, the panic. I didn't know that. Yeah.
Luckily, it didn't take long, though, for police to clear her and finally put their focus on the real perpetrator.
Okay, good.
6 days later, on March 19th, 1964, Winston Moseley was arrested for suspected robbery in Ozone Park after a television set was discovered in the trunk of his car. Now, what happened here is an onlooker became suspicious when he saw Moseley removing the television from a neighbor's house and putting it into his car. So the neighbor called the police.
Yeah. Neighbor called the police and there was a response, huh?
Sure was, yep.
Ironic.
Now, a detective recalled that several witnesses to Kitty's murder had seen a white car similar to Moseley's in Kew Gardens that night.
Okay.
So they questioned him about his car being at the scene of Kitty's murder. And not only did he admit to raping and murdering Kitty, he told police he was responsible for 2 other rapes and murders.
Whoa.
A woman by the name of Annie Mae Johnson, who had been shot and burned to death in her apartment in South Ozone Park just a few weeks earlier, and 15-year-old Barbara Kralik, who had been killed in her parents' Springfield Gardens home the previous July.
So I didn't know he was a serial killer.
I was just going to say, this would make him a serial killer.
Wow. I never knew this.
I didn't either. There's so many aspects of this case that were so unknown to me.
Yeah.
All right, so let's stop for a minute and talk a little bit about Winston Moseley, because he is a chronic serial offender.
Yeah.
Now, he's from Ozone Park, Queens, and he was 29 years old at the time of Kitty's murder. He worked as a tab operator. Basically, he prepared punch cards that were used at the time mainly for data input for digital computers. Mm-hmm. I don't even understand really what that means, but it's...
I think I kind of get it, but okay.
Maybe surprising to you. I was surprised. He was married with 3 children and had no criminal record until being caught stealing the TV.
Not exactly surprising. A lot of serial offenders actually do have families. Yeah, but no criminal history. I would say some had no. That's a mixed bag. So
But this is also a good reminder that criminal record is not indicative of prior criminal behavior.
Absolutely.
Because and also, he never got caught for those 2 other murders.
And it was harder to catch people. And remember, serial offenders' heyday was like the 60s and 70s until, ways to apprehend them got better. But wow, what a shocker.
And while he was in custody, he provided detectives all the details on Kitty's murder. He explained that he got up that night around 2 a.m. while his wife was working nights as a registered nurse. Although there are some reports that say his wife was at home sleeping, so that's mixed also. Okay. But either way, his children were left home sleeping and his wife either was working nights or she was sleeping as well. He drove through Queens to find a victim. So he said his plan that evening was to go out and victimize a woman. So he was on the prowl when he saw Kitty on her way home, and he followed her to the parking lot before chasing her down and killing her. Again, he followed her from work to her car and then followed her home and then got on foot once she got on foot.
Did he say that he was looking for someone to assault, murder, or we just know in general he just said he was looking to victimize someone?
I think just victimize, but given his history, it seems like rape and murder was his MO.
Yep.
And everything he told the police was corroborated by the physical evidence at the scene. And when asked who Kitty was to him, he answered that she was no one. He was just simply looking to kill a woman.
Yeah.
And that he preferred to kill women because they were easier and didn't fight back.
Yep.
So I guess that kind of answers the question you just asked.
Yeah, kind of.
Besides confessing to murdering and sexually assaulting 2 other women, as previously mentioned, he also said that he committed between 30 and 40 burglaries. And subsequent psychiatric examinations suggested that Mosley was a necrophile.
Oh, he's a necrophile. Okay.
Sorry, necrophile. What does that mean? I know that's your...
It means that he has sex with dead bodies, so he has sex with corpses after. And that is not totally uncommon of serial offenders either.
But this is based on self-report. So it's possible he was just looking to shock, the forensic assessor. Who knows? But
I wouldn't be surprised if that was true.
Yeah.
A number of serial offenders, for various reasons, and not just one reason, will go back and have sex with the bodies. They talk about the possession, the ownership, the thrill again, just the accessibility. Like it's very shocking.
Yeah.
And let's also not forget, in this case, he raped Kitty while she was dying, and so I think that's also indicative of the potential for that type of behavior.
Valid point. He was charged with Kitty's murder, but he was never charged with the 2 other murders that he had admitted to. I'm not sure exactly why. I would think maybe it was lack of evidence. Also, in one of these cases, another man, Alvin Mitchell, had confessed, and this was in the murder of Barbara Kralik. So I don't know if, maybe it's also possible that Winston didn't commit these crimes and he just wanted to take credit for them. Who actually knows? But in the case of Kitty, his trial began on June 8th, 1964. But his attorney later changed his plea to not guilty by reason of insanity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Going with insanity.
Which I just taught this recently in my forensic psychology class. And my students were shocked to know how rare it is for someone to bring up that defense.
Yeah.
So I believe it's less than 1% of all cases actually have someone bring up that or someone plea to that. And then I believe it's less than 25% are actually successful.
Yep.
And he testified, which we know is rare for a defendant, but I think maybe in this case he had to. But, he described the events on the night that he murdered Kitty. He also talked about the other murders and his burglaries and other rapes that he had committed.
What's the medical diagnosis, or insanity is the legal term, but what's the underlying condition that qualified him? We don't know.
Well, he wasn't qualified because the jury found him guilty.
Okay. Yep. All right. Great.
Yes. So the jury deliberated for 7 hours, which I'm surprised they even deliberated that long with the evidence in the case. But they did return a guilty verdict on June 11th. On June 15th, he was sentenced to death for the murder of Kitty Genovese. When the jury foreman read the sentence, Mosley showed no emotion while spectators applauded and cheered. And the judge remarked, quote, "I don't believe in capital punishment, but when I see a monster like this, I wouldn't hesitate to pull the switch myself."
Whoa.
Right?
Wow. Even for people who aren't like strong, I always say it, like, I'm not a real advocate for the death penalty. There are certain cases that you go, this might be the case for which it exists. But having a judge say that's extreme.
Yeah, very extreme.
Wow.
We're not done here with the court proceedings, however, because on June 1st, 1967, the New York Court of Appeals found that Mosley should have been able to argue that he was medically insane at the sentencing hearing. Now, the trial court found that he had been legally sane and the sentence was reduced to life imprisonment.
Why?
But that's okay. It's okay. He's still life without parole.
No, it's okay. I don't understand what happened, though. Okay.
I don't know. So basically, the trial court said that he was legally sane, but they also reduced the sentence.
Okay. Yeah. Life in prison is okay, too. Yeah.
Yeah. But he didn't serve his time without incident.
Oh.
Just a year later, on March 18th, 1968, he escaped while being transported back to prison from a medical appointment in Buffalo, New York. He had undergone a minor surgery for a self-inflicted injury.
Oh, so he planned all this?
Well, listen to this. He hit the transporting correctional officer, stole his weapon, and fled to a nearby vacant house where he stayed undetected for 3 days.
Okay, all right.
This case just has so many layers. It's like just when you think that we're done, there's something else.
Never heard any of this before.
So after a couple of days, the owners went to check on the house and they encountered him. And he held the couple hostage for more than an hour, binding and gagging the husband and raping the wife before stealing the couple's car and fleeing.
This is awful.
The next day, he broke into another house and held a woman and her daughter hostage for 2 hours before releasing them unharmed. He then surrendered to police shortly afterwards. I don't know why he surrendered. Maybe he realized they were closing in on him. It doesn't sound like he's someone that would have just surrendered for any reason.
I'm going to take back what I said when we said life in prison was okay. I take it back.
Yeah, he might. Okay.
I think that maybe, even on death row, would there have been different protocols? Like, I don't know. I take it back.
Because of these crimes, he was charged with escape and kidnapping, to which he pled guilty. He was given 2 additional 15-year sentences to run concurrently with his life sentence.
Okay.
And he didn't try to escape again, but he did not serve his time quietly. In September of 1971, Mosley participated in the Attica prison riots.
Yep. As soon as you said 1971, I was like, it's the Attica riots.
Yep.
Oh, my gosh.
Though after this, he did seem to go under the radar and obtained a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology while incarcerated. And this was from Niagara University. In 1984, he became eligible for parole. So it was not a life without parole sentence. It was just a life sentence.
Oh, please say
Listen to this, though.
No,
Wait, this
don't
is going to infuriate
parole.
you. No. During his first parole hearing, he told the parole board that the notoriety he faced due to his crimes made him a victim, stating, for a victim outside, it's a one-time or 1 hour or 1 minute affair. But for the person who's caught, it's forever.
You're kidding me.
Nope. At that same year.
I'm sure that's great because the parole board must have been like, no way you're getting parole.
Yeah, he made that easy.
Yeah.
At the same hearing, he claimed he never intended to kill Kitty and that he considered her murder to be a mugging because, quote, people do kill people when they mug them sometimes. That doesn't even make sense.
I just want to hear the part where they deny him parole.
Yeah, of course they denied his request for parole.
All right.
And then it was almost 25 years before he went up again for parole. That's a long time.
That's a long time. Well, we've talked about this on other episodes. I don't know how it worked then, but parole board can fix a time and just say, no, this guy is not even close. He needs to serve a lot longer. So
when he went up for parole again, ironically, it was on March 13th, 2008, which was the 44th anniversary of Kitty's murder.
And how old was he then?
Oh, at this point, he had to have been...
I wonder, was he in his 20s
70s?
or 30s when he perpetrated the crime?
When he killed Kitty?
Yeah.
He was 29.
So if he's 29...
And
plus,
44 years later.
I can't do math, so I'm looking down. So that makes him 73?
Yeah, he's up there. And believe it or not, he continued to show little remorse and parole was again denied.
Good.
This happened several more times with parole being denied every single time. And Winston Mosley would go on to die in prison at the age of 81 on March 28th, 2016.
Okay.
He served 52 years.
I mean,
And this
yeah.
actually makes him one of the longest serving inmates in New York State prison system history.
Oh, really?
Again, there's so many parts of this case that are just so interesting.
Surprising, yeah.
52 years. Yep.
Well, I'm glad he died in prison.
Okay, we've spent a lot of time on Winston, but what about the victim in this case?
Yeah.
So Kitty was buried on March 16th, 1964 in Lakeview Cemetery in New Canaan, Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
Her legacy lives on in many ways. Kitty's story contributed to the development of the 911 emergency call system in the U.S., and it was launched shortly after in 1968, about 4 years after Kitty's death. And do you know where the first 911 call was made?
Shouldn't I know this? We've covered this in a previous episode, have we not? And my
Which
memory...
case? Do you remember which case you covered?
Was it my case or yours? I feel like we've both covered a case that related to this, and neither of us can remember. We have terrible memories.
I don't know, but the first call, it was in Haleyville, Alabama.
Oh, okay.
I know.
No, I don't remember.
So the federal government worked with AT&T and other agencies to create a system that would allow people to call one easy-to-remember number in any emergency. Fun fact, do you know why it's 911 and not, say, 999?
I feel like you've even asked me this before, and I don't know, but go ahead.
It's so fun because of the rotary phone. It would take too long for the 999.
We've covered this before. I know we have. Just so
have we? Because I thought it was so interesting, and I thought it was new information.
I think I swear that sounds familiar. It is very interesting again. Apparently, it's like new information because we don't remember. So
I know. Okay. So in 1968. Before 1968, there was no centralized way for citizens to report crimes.
Yeah.
So no universal number to call in emergencies. So people were left to having to call local police stations, and this varied from city to city. So in an emergency, there was delays, there was confusion, and unfortunately, because of this, people's lives were lost, such as Kitty's.
It's interesting that we're covering this today because yesterday we got these emergency alerts all through the day saying 911 was down. And that if we had an emergency, this is in Pennsylvania where we're in the water gap, if we had an emergency, we were to call local authorities. That's the first time I've ever received a message like that in my life.
Do you know how long it was down for?
We got many messages throughout the day, so several hours at least.
Wow.
Felt like maybe 8 hours it was down for.
That's interesting because I would imagine most people don't know their local police number. So God forbid there's an emergency, you have to Google it. And then
that's exactly what I said. I'm like, that's not convenient. But that's interesting that it happened just yesterday. Okay.
Yeah. While Kitty's case didn't directly create 911, it's definitely a case that is considered to have played a major role in accelerating the demand for a national emergency number.
Sure.
Now, the media coverage, much of it later to be found exaggerated, sparked national conversations about civic responsibility and urban apathy. Later investigations would show that the original narrative was heavily distorted. Remember the 37, 38 bystanders?
Yeah.
Not true. That number, some people think it came from the amount of apartment buildings that were in the area. Like, no one really knows exactly where that came from. But there were some witnesses who did try to help. There were some that just didn't know what were happening. And several people did call the police.
Sorry, but then there were, I'm sure, a handful of people who did hear and didn't do anything. So
yes, there were a lot of ear witnesses, not eyewitnesses.
Right.
So the 37, 38 bystanders, the way they made it sound was that these people were looking out their window, watching this girl get murdered, and everyone just kept to themselves. Where in reality, only a couple of people saw it. Some people did call. The other people just heard commotion. So Kitty's story is still used today in sociology and psychology courses to discuss moral responsibility, but even more so to discuss conversations around sensationalism in the media and how media shapes public perceptions.
Right.
These headlines that I read earlier fueled a moral panic and also led to many academic studies on what became known as the bystander effect.
Right.
In some places, you hear it called the Genovese syndrome, but it's more often called, you never heard that, right? Okay.
No.
It's also known as bystander apathy. And essentially what it is it's a social psychological phenomenon where individuals are less likely to help someone in need when other people are present. In fact, the more bystanders there are, the less personal responsibility each person feels to act. Simply the idea is that people are less likely to help someone in need when others are around because everyone just assumes that somebody else will act.
Right.
I'm not going to lie. I'm guilty of this. I hate to admit it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm sure at some level I am too. I can't think of
Yeah.
I'm sure I am as well.
For those of our listeners who don't live in a big city such as New York City, when you know this, Meghan, you walk around and there's stuff going on all the time. There's a lot of mental illness, public drunkenness. And I'm guilty of seeing, I've seen people lying on the floor maybe because of a drug overdose. And there's so many people around, you don't want to get involved and you just assume someone else is going to call. And I think back to this particular time and I regret not calling. In my defense, I was younger. I was just starting grad school. I was just new to the city. I was scared. But I do understand this idea, especially in an urban area when there's so many people around. You're someone else definitely called already.
Yeah. Now that you brought it up that way, I just wasn't thinking properly about it. But absolutely in New York, I'm certain that I'm guilty of that too on some level. Or again, the mixed things that happen, maybe it's not that serious. This is more normal than you think in New York, things like that. But no, I agree.
And also nowadays with cell phones, if I see someone on the side of the road, or even if it's the start of an accident, a very minor accident, of course, I just assume they have a cell phone. They're calling for help themselves or, someone else will take care of it. I want to just go into a few key factors behind the bystander effect. So the first is diffusion of responsibility. And again, that's when each person assumes somebody else will step in, so they don't. Then there's this idea of social influence, also known as pluralistic ignorance. And this is that when people look to others for cues on how to react. So if no one else is helping, they assume that help isn't needed.
Yep.
Then there's fear of judgment. Bystanders might worry about intervening incorrectly or drawing unwanted attention. And then there's the issue with, the Good Samaritan laws, where if you do help someone, you used to be able to you could have been held civilly responsible if you did more harm. So people were probably worried about that as well.
Right.
So because of psychologists studying this, it has helped shift how we understand group behavior and individual responsibility. But again, this case was really integral in the understanding of some of these phenomenons.
Yeah.
Okay, so did the system get it right? I mean, this man served over 50 years. I think the system got it right as far as how long he served, certainly.
I think him not being paroled was right, but I still think back to his escape and the sexual assault, holding a child hostage, all the things that happened. I wonder if the sentence had been different had that not happened. And I don't know that, but I do know death row is a different ballgame in terms of security, transport, things like that.
That's a good point.
So I'm just going to say yes, they did the best they could with the sentence, but I don't, yes.
Okay. I mean, when we look to understand why he committed his crimes, I think it's just very clear that he was a chronic violent offender.
Yes.
Who would continue offending until he got caught.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely true.
I also want to point out, do you have another?
No, I just want to know if we're going to talk about media and crime, because that I would like to talk about just a little bit systemically.
Yes, we could talk about that in 1 minute. Let me just round out theories. Because I forgot you teach media and crime. I should have asked your opinion on that more.
No, that's okay.
So for theories of victimization, I think routine activities theory, deviant place theory, lifestyle theory. Again, I say this to the point where our listeners are so sick of it and my students are sick of it. But theories of victimization are not blaming the victim. They are helping us understand why somebody may have been targeted over someone else.
Yeah, certain professions, certain times, certain places, unfortunately, increase the likelihood of victimization at no fault of the victim.
No fault at all of the victim. Unfortunately, this woman was alone by herself late at night. There weren't other people around. There was a motivated offender who was on the prowl. And Kitty was a very attractive target. By attractive, I don't mean what she looked like, but that's what the theory says. Yeah. She was a woman who was by herself, and there was a lack of capable guardians. This was a time where surveillance was not the way it is now. Right. There was nobody else around, and unfortunately, it was...
no 911.
No 911. Yeah, it was a perfect scenario. All of the variables, unfortunately, lined up in a way that made Kitty the perfect victim on that night.
Oh, yes. I mean, all this to say that none of those factors place the appropriate blame on the offender. So,
of course.
You know.
Of course. So what did you want to talk about with, let's talk about media and crime a little.
Yeah, I just want to talk about the irresponsibility of media misreporting. It's still really, I was just talking about this with someone else, reporting things, exaggerating them, not verifying the sources, just reporting for a good headline is so irresponsible and can be so harmful to what we know and understand about crime, victimization, people's behavior. Like what you've described the narrative was so incorrect. And it's such a dangerous line. And I really believe and want to see media responsibility in various ways. And I can't stress that enough, how much help the media, because the media could be so helpful. And I even cover that in my class. In ways the media are helpful, but in other ways, so destructive. So responsible reporting. And we can always choose where to consume our media. And I always say that because people ask, what can I do? Choose your media and look at your media, the ethics, and fact check things. And if someone's not delivering the truth, go somewhere else. Sorry.
Unfortunately, you don't always know what the truth is. That's when it gets tricky. But you're absolutely right.
True.
Do your own research.
Just awareness. That's all.
And in this case, the New York Times definitely corrected their errors years later. Actually, it may have been decades later that they issued corrections. So you can see, if you go online, you can see some of the older articles, but the newer articles, they all have corrections. And it is well known that this case was not accurately reported. But there was also an interview with one of the editors of the Times, and he talks about how he doesn't regret reporting it this way. And it also reminds me of the Amanda Knox documentary, that excellent documentary that talked about the way the media treated Amanda in that case as well, villainizing her and, false information, and just everything she did was under a microscope.
Yeah, I completely agree. A lot of high-profile cases, too. Well, okay.
All right. Well,
are we at the end? Oh, my gosh, this was so interesting.
I hope you learned a lot. I'm certainly going to teach about this case differently. I was under the impression for many, many years, when I pictured this case, I pictured a projects in New York City where there's a courtyard in the middle and people were outside of their windows watching this girl get murdered. That's the visual I always had about this case.
Same.
And it's not that at all.
No.
All right. Well, I hope I set the record straight for a lot of our listeners. I look forward to hearing from people. How many of you have also been misinformed like us? So definitely reach out and let us know what you think. But before we go today, we have a question from a supporter.
Okay.
All right. And as always, thank you for your support. We really appreciate all of you who listen, who tell a friend, who subscribe, who leave a review. We could not do this without you all. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I love this question so much.
Okay.
What's one common true crime trope that does not hold up under criminological scrutiny? By the way, it's also so brilliantly worded.
Who? Yeah,
we have the smartest listeners.
All right. You want to go first?
The one that comes to mind, because we were just talking about victimization, is the idea that victimization is random. You often hear that person was at the wrong place at the wrong time, and that's certainly not the case. Victimization could be understood through the lens of many theories of victimization. Of course, there are times where it is random, but statistically speaking, there are factors that we can look to see, correlations between victimization and demographic information and demographic characteristics.
Someone wrote to us, too, saying that, and this was something I've been thinking about, that we should never say wrong place, wrong time. It's almost ascribing blame to the victim as well. Yep. And we don't mean to do that. And I'm there's just a wrong person. And that's the offender.
Yes.
So I think that was well noted and a great answer.
Oh, sorry. Can I do one more?
Yeah, go ahead.
The other one that I hear, again, I'm currently teaching that summer class, and I asked my students, how many cases do you think go to trial?
I was going to say
that.
And
they were 60%. And I'm like, no, not at all. There's only 3% of cases. It goes down to 1% when we talk about misdemeanor cases. So I think that's a big one, is the misconception that so many cases go to trial when most cases are pled out. Sorry if I took yours.
No, I was going to say that. But there's also, there's a ton of misconceptions. But I don't know if that question actually is asking criminological, like theory-wise.
What's one common true crime trope that doesn't hold up under criminological scrutiny? So, yeah.
Your victimization, right? So I was going to go on and say, like, we have a misconception that all crimes are violent, when in fact most crimes are property. But criminologically, I think the idea also that people are sick or deranged. It's like, no, there's explanations for, even if there isn't a sickness. The idea that crime is abnormal and committed by abnormal people, I think, is mostly untrue.
I love that one. Because when you look at how much, yes, there is a correlation between mental illness and crime, but we know that there's also a large majority of crimes that can be explained using many other theories.
Correct. Great question. Wording
I
is
love
brilliant.
That question.
Wording is brilliant.
Yes. Thank you so much for that question. And as always, if you have a question for us, feel free to message us at womenandcrimepodcast.com/contact. And as a reminder, if you are a patron at the Lifer tier, your question is guaranteed to be read on air. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will catch you next time on Women in Crime.
Women in Crime is written and hosted by Meghan Sachs and Amy Shlosberg. Our producer is James Varga. Script editing is by Abigail Belcastro. Audio editing is by Siler Burr and Jose Alfonso. And music is by Desert Media. If you enjoy the show, please remember to follow and leave a review. You can also support the show through Patreon, where you can get access to additional ad-free content such as exclusive full-length episodes, lectures, a book club, and virtual happy hours with Meghan and Amy. For more information, visit patreon.com/womenandcrime.
Sources for today's episode include The New York Times, The New York Daily News, The New Yorker, Psychology Today, PBS, the book Kitty Genovese, The Murder, the Bystanders, The Crime That Changed America by Kevin Cook, and The Washington Post.